Here we are 2 weeks later. What topic would you like to avoid today?
The book or whatever. No, I don't know. To be honest, I'm really excited because I was thinking I haven't gotten to how to visualize this, but when people think of writing the book, there's the path of, okay, you have to have an idea, manuscript, you edit it, then you publish it, and then you start doing speaking engagement or workshops. Well, I'm doing tomorrow a workshop on my book.
I love it. It is
That
not
is not
published yet.
finished, not finished even. But then I have to create some stuff for the content and a tool and whatever that then it's going to retrofit the book. So creating the workshop helped me. Oh, what's the book? Oh, it's missing this. Okay, boom. So I'm back and forth instead of a sequence. The workshop now has helped me. Okay, how are people going to use my book? Because I'm
Mm,
always, I don't want people just to read and say, oh, how. So now I started thinking like what things make sense, what not. So I'm super excited.
that is great. And it's like prototyping a book,
Exactly. Yeah, that's a
which
great way
makes a
to
lot
put
of
it.
sense actually.
If it goes wrong, then I throw the book out because it doesn't work. That's
No,
a
that's not
super
what you do
test.
with a prototype, Gustavo.
I do. I throw stuff
Improve
away all
it.
the time. No, sometimes you need to kill it and start over, which I don't think is the case. But it's interesting because when the client asks me, okay, what are different? It's a university. I know they want everything like fact check and say,
Mm.
well, what are they gonna? I say, look, I have a lot of topics, blah blah, but I would like to do a workshop on my new book and say, oh, is it published? I say, no, no, and I don't even know what's gonna publish. Oh, really? But I say, come on, don't you want to bring to your professors and leadership something new that no one had? I say, oh yeah, that's cool, let's do it. So there, and now I'm talking with another university in Australia, probably to do exactly the same in a month from now. So
That is great. It's like the wing from the future. Yeah. Do you want to work with a
so yeah,
method that doesn't even exist yet?
exactly. And we're gonna create it together. And the client was saying, hey, can you send us the printouts? And when I say, hey, I'm still working, I'm gonna send it last minute because they're I'm still in the okay, let's move this, blah blah.
Very interesting. I like that. And it's yeah, a very unprofessional way of approaching a book project.
Yeah.
Unprofessional in my sense of the term, of course.
Mhm.
Um, Great. I'm very curious to hear then in 2 weeks what's coming out and in which direction it took your book.
Yeah, sure. I will tell you, but I'm super excited about it.
Yeah.
The non-linear path, and then that's something that we need to always keep in mind. You were mentioning before we you press record that you were frustrated. I was going to ask you, you didn't, are you frustrated with the book or are you frustrated with yourself? Like,
Ooh.
oh, push.
At this point, I'm taking full responsibility, so I'm frustrated with myself. And I think it's very what I realize is that I mentioned that I think 2 weeks ago already. I think I'm avoiding the real stuff. I I printed out the first kind of what 25 pages to cross read them and see whether it's a nice flow. And I realized that it's basically 25 pages of introduction that should be 3 pages. And
Or not?
yeah,
Why
I
should the
was
introduction
reading
be
it.
short? I'm not
Yes,
saying you
and
shouldn't, but
yeah, I mean, if I write 1,000 pages, then maybe 20 pages of introduction are good. Um, but I was then wondering what is really the book what is the message that I want to write about? And it's not about the history of professionalism, and it's not ranting about what's going on in the world. And I think it's very easy to get on a path and to point out everything that's not working and to see everything that supports my theory. What I actually want to do is to get into the hope, into the stories, how have others used air quotes unprofessional methods to be successful? What are the trades to become more human at work and these kind of things. And I think I've been avoiding that because it's maybe because it's scary and because I care so much. I and I had the epiphany today actually. Last week I was in a podcast of someone and he called me a touchy-feely facilitator and I felt offended.
Then you're a touchy-feely facilitator. Why did you feel?
I felt
Let
offended
me, let
be
me,
yes.
go ahead. No, no.
I
You
felt
talk and
offended
then.
because for me a touchy-feely facilitator is someone who's all about the softness and the sitting in the circle and the humanness but without substance. And then today I had the epiphany that actually, yes, I am a touchy-feely facilitator and I'm a facilitator with substance. And I think that's what I want the book to be, to to make touchy-feely professional again.
Hmm. Did you ask the interviewer what the touchy-feely meant for them?
Yeah, I think it was the focusing on the inner work and how we feel and speaking about emotions and yeah, being less about the activities and the methods and more about the mindset and how we show up and these kind of things.
I think it's labels, right? So maybe they're focusing on one area. So tools by themselves don't change behavior. Emotions and touchy-feely by itself doesn't. So you need a combination. And some people get stuck into the how are you? Give me you what are you feeling? Blah blah. And then okay, great. So but then so what? They fail to connect that with the because you can feel happy and then what so are you going to do better work then you can feel sad and then like a but you can turn sadness or frustration into a superpower and that's where facilitation comes. It's not what you get from people but what you turn it into.
Mm.
So you're touchy feely if you stay there, but if you're able to turn that into something then you're a good facilitator. Talking about
Yeah.
wine.
Yeah, and for me the where maybe it becomes touchy-feely is just acknowledging it. And I think very often we try to fight against these frustrations. Um, and therefore we cannot progress, we cannot work with it. But the moment we acknowledge that we are all human and we have good days and bad days, and sometimes we feel frustrated, um, then it kind of relaxes the nervous system, and then we can work with that.
Mhm. And what exactly made you react that way? Because you can say, okay, thank you for your feedback or opinion, because that's what feedback, and then move on. And what got you?
Um, I think maybe because I recognize that I do become more woo woo with age. I found myself singing mantras last weekend.
And
That's very woo woo. It's very touchy feely, and it's also okay. So maybe it's finding peace with labels and with yeah, being softer as well.
mhm.
Yeah, and to reunite. So I think in my mind, I thought that it's either substance or touchy feely, and I think there's something that where we can basically bring them together. Um,
Are you talking about professionalism and non-professionalism?
yeah. So how to make touchy feely professional again? I wouldn't say again. How to make it professional? Yeah. So yeah. And now it's about how to bring that back. So basically, I started a new draft, fresh page um to see where do I want to land, and from there, how much of the history and how much of all the context do I actually need.
A new draft, just to be clear, a new draft of the introduction that felt long or of
Mhm.
the part one?
The part one. So now I put it aside. I'm like, okay, it's great that I've done all that research and I think it's important. So I don't want to delete it for now. but I think I would like to potentially reduce it to the parts that are actually important for the remainder of the narrative.
Mhm.
So now I want to write the narrative. And it's actually the advice that you gave me 4 weeks ago. Why don't you start with the end chapter instead of the next one? So yeah, sometimes I'm a little bit in processing your advice. I will do that now.
No, it wasn't advice. I mean, sometimes when we try to people that know how to write books, they say don't write and edit at the same time, right? So sometimes we
Guilty.
write, boom, and now next, and then we start thinking, is it too long? Is it needed? But in order to make those decisions, we need to have the whole stuff. That's why
Yes.
I'm saying the introduction usually in most book is just a summary of what people can expect from the book. But if you want to share as an introduction how you wrote the book and the journey and whatever, then maybe that's something people want to read. You know what I mean? So a one-page introduction might be. I usually skip introductions because they just try to set the stage. But if they have really like a review of why I started with the unprofessionalism and whatever and the struggles,
That's true.
why I'm, then it's different. But
Yeah. And I, yes. And then now I'm thinking of you and your workshops, all the prototype workshops, descriptions of what came out of them and what you did could also be a beautiful introduction or annex.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. So now I'm diving into the stuff that is actually relevant to me. And I think that's a difficult part. Um,
maybe where do you want to land? Do you want to land in a new planet, or do you want to land in a position in which you get to see the moon or whatever the planet is, but you're not there? You know what I mean? So you want to redefine what professionalism or unprofessionalism is, or you want to give it like a getting closer to it, but if you want there, you need to go through your journey. You know what I mean? Like a
mm, I think I want to show hope, um, because, yeah, that there is light on the end at the end of the tunnel, um, and that it's actually all there already. We just have to dare to go there. I think that's where I would like to land. Because I wonder how, and I would be curious about your process. So I'm collecting all these examples, all these case studies that actually confirm exactly what I have in my mind and what I want to, the story that I want to tell. And then how to merge them into the book. How do you how do you collect your case studies and then put them at the right place? Or do you first write the chapter and then you put your case study in?
I let me one of the mistakes I think I make in retrospect when I wrote my previous book is that I added maybe too much research
Hmm.
and stories and whatever. And then I realized, well, maybe I was trying to support my ideas with third parties, either to look objective or to make sure that it's not just my thing. And now I'm more into the okay, but if you have novel thinking, then it's always hard to find research that's going to support what you did because if not, you're going to. So you can analyze what happened and all the facts and then present a conclusion, or you can present a hypothesis that's half baked
Hmm.
and then time will tell.
Yeah.
So, for example, in my book, one of the things I talk about the different models for hybrid in my previous book, not the hybrid work. And at that point, when I published it in 2022, like July, whatever, the conversation was still very up. And now people are into the office, not office. And I was saying, hey, it's not one or the other. It's the best. And well, don't get. So now answering your question is I'm more into the what is this chapter all about or this section, right? So I say, well, I need a story of someone like Myriam that's integrating being touchy-feely and whatever. Boom. And I then write it. And then I see if I finish. I don't want to look a story that fits exactly, but a story that's gonna. And sometimes I don't get the story or get a different story, and then it helps me like a. But I don't try to have further story and then see where they fit. So you can build the puzzle
Mm,
and find the pieces, or you can find the pieces and then recreate the puzzle. So,
yeah. And what I hear is also to trust with all the years of experience that the right story will come up if I'm clear about the message of the chapter.
the years, because you just asked me about how old I was. Is that I don't think it's just, once again, we're talking for those who are watching, we're talking about aging and wisdom and age, and not necessarily they link one another. And I think that you need a lot of time doing something to have a thought on it. And there are people that have been observing the same stuff for decades and they haven't uncovered anything new. So my point is, you don't need to justify what you think is your perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Of course, challenge your perspective so you are not blind, but don't over justify it. You know what I mean? Don't
yeah,
oversell it, don't over demonstrate, don't over
yeah,
because then you're going to lose that fresh perspective.
absolutely. And I was not even thinking, so you already convinced me last time about the over analyzing and looking for too much research. So I became better. So every time that I find research and others who wrote about it, I kind of have my own little celebration. But still, I'm like, okay, that's my imposter syndrome talking. Um, but they almost every day when I work with clients or when I think of lived experience, I have all these anecdotes popping up in my head. And I'm like, oh, that perfectly fits into the book. And then I have the impression that yeah, I wonder how I can fit them in so that it's not just a collection of Miriam's anecdotes.
Hmm.
And also where I don't squeeze then the narrative of the book to just fit the anecdotes. So what I hear is looking on the big picture narrative of the book and then trusting that the right anecdote will pop up at the right place when I need it.
Mhm. Let me build on something and see if this maybe helps both of us. Because in the end, we talk many times about killing our darlings, and our darlings are not just our ideas, are also maybe research or case studies that we love, but then they don't. And I interviewed a lot of people for my previous book, and then I felt some kind of obligation to include people in the book because
Hmm.
they took the time, and then that something that I don't want to repeat. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like no
yeah.
offense for what was there, but some maybe they shouldn't have. You know,
And I
then.
remember I had that for my, and it's a good reminder, I had that during my PhD thesis. And I was making jokes recently that this writing a book is much more difficult than writing a PhD thesis, I find, because you have so many more degrees of freedom. But I remember that reading through a difficult article, finally making sense of someone's ideas and all the theory. And then after I worked so hard for it, now I need to include it. So these were the
Mhm.
darlings most difficult to kill when we worked really hard for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. That was well needed.
So going back to the frustration, what's what's the real frustration?
I think the real frustration is also that I underestimated how difficult it will be to really put in long chunks of time. So I think if I sit down for an hour here and there, I mostly harm the book more than I add because 1 hour is, or maybe I get back into it and then I start editing and then I st start adding stuff that actually doesn't make sense in the end.
Hmm.
So what I really need is a full day or at least 4 hours of uninterrupted time to really let it flow. Um, and I think I have to be more, and that's a frustration with me more than with the book. I have to find a better routine of really making time for that.
Talking about that, I follow your advice too. So in May, because I have very complicated and a lot of travel and vacation, whatever, I booked 10 days in a cabin in the middle of mountains and I blocked everything. No meetings, no clients, no workshops, and boom, I'm gonna go with my computer and my book.
I love that. And I might copy you.
No, I copied you because you went to Australia for whatever time. But so I say like I need to make the time to a point, squeezing 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. I feel that I need to get into the acceleration, and building this workshop has helped me like test some stuff. So I have a very selfish or self-serving, if you wish, a test. Usually people ask you, will people like to read your book?
Mm.
The like, is this something? For me, it's like, will I read the book?
Mm,
Because I am a person that gets bored really easily. So
I
I
love
think that
that.
we need as author first, if we're not gonna enjoy reading our own books, how can we expect other people to do it? You know what I mean? So in
Yes.
that sense, it feels less that a task that we need to accomplish, like a project. We need to finish it. We need to write it versus it's a creature that we are
Nurturing.
growing.
Mm,
But as the creature grows, it's gonna take its own path, and we need to let it run.
that's scary. And then
What life?
always. And now I wonder, oh, will I read it? I'm a very picky reader. Yeah. And it's actually what's a book that you read and that you read really until the end? What are the things that make it stand out for you? Or maybe not even stand out, but follow through.
First of all, when it comes to the rhythm that we're talking about, like business books,
Hmm.
I usually read them like in chunks. I never follow the order. So I zoom in and out. One of the things I built, like a very bad habit, is that because I write a lot, I go and look for research or sources or whatever. So I buy a book because I'm trying to get into a topic, and then maybe I read one third of it. I don't know what I mean. So I zoom in and out versus reading the book.
Mm. And yeah, and I read similarly. So I was making fun that very soon I can actually color code the unread books that are piling up on my shelf because I order more than I can read. Um, and I don't necessarily finish books. And still, there are a few books that I do finish
Mhm,
and that I have finished. And I'm just thinking, what makes these books stand out? And I think it's a nice mix of storytelling
mhm.
and substance. So is it something that actually helps me thinking about life and work in a different way. Um,
Hmm. I
and
think when,
mhm.
sorry, no, no, go ahead, please.
And when I say storytelling, what bores me nowadays is that all the books always start with, "Oh, here was Jim. Jim was the CEO of a large multinational company." Blah, 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 blah. And it feels so kind of sterile. But when the author talks about their own experience in a storytelling and a good language, then I enjoy it.
Hmm. Yeah. Something happens to me like there's a lot of people who write books about things that they've observed, but they never were part of.
Mm.
So it's like being a historian. That's maybe what's because it feels dry versus being one of the people who've been in the battle or in the Congress fighting for whatever law. That's different from those who are detached from stuff. Because in the end, a book needs to be in business book, right? We're not talking about fiction. Like
Mhm.
it needs to be helpful. It needs to be useful. And the best way to turn something useful is, to your point, connected to what you have done. So if you write a book about life, but you haven't lived, and many people write, I mean, there's a lot of, no offense, but there are professors that they do a bit of consulting, but most of their stuff is they talk.
Yeah.
We are paid not to talk, but to help other people talk, which is different. No, that speaker
Mm.
talks, they're paid to talk, we're helped to. And that's a difference because you're involved in the conversations, in the real situation, the real. So when I work with teams, I see, I mean, the real shit that happens, and you're not speaking from here and then you,
Yeah.
oh yeah, get people upload and then you leave. You're involved into the nitty-gritty. And I was there when I was part of a team, when I was a CEO, whatever. So I think that many times the books are written from an observer standpoint. That's not bad, but
Yeah. And what just clicked, or at least what I heard, is the catchphrase, "Do you dare to be the hero of your book?" Because yet we're not writing fiction. And still, I think that the hero's journey still
mhm,
applies to a non-fiction book. So, what is the problem? What is the journey? The hero goes on their path. They're fighting the obstacles. They're having the revelation, and then they're coming home transformed. And I think if we can follow this narrative in a pop science book, or we have to in order to make it interesting. And then the thing is, do we dare to be the hero of this story? So to make it about our own learnings instead of pointing at someone else or keeping at a distance where it's safe, observing and referring to research.
mhm. For example, one thing that comes, I'm writing an article, I need to finish, so I put other articles on top, priority, but which is about challenging the idea of psychological safety. And we talked with you about it, right?
Hmm.
And research I'm doing for my book shows that basically you can put people in three groups. And my point is psychological safety is just one element. It's not the, so it's the context. And there are some people that in a safe environment or in an unsafe environment, they still speak up
Hmm.
because of their personality and who they are. There are people that they don't speak in a unsafe, but even in a safe environment, they also don't participate. They can speak up, but they're not, they're for many reasons. And then there are people that the environment can make them speak more or less. So what shows is the environment is just one element of the equation,
Is it?
not the only. You see what I'm saying?
And so what I make out of that is that people react differently in the same environment. So because I think psychological safety is something that is not objective.
It's a
You cannot
construct.
you
Yeah.
cannot say that this environment is psychologically safe. And I get the cringes when I walk in a workshop and a facilitator says, "This is a safe place." I'm like, what the who
Why?
are
I
you
always
to
say
tell me
that.
that it's safe, right?
I always say that. Is that bad?
You're making fun of me, right?
No.
Oh. Because for me,
If I
if
say it, it's happened, because I'm the facilitator. Okay. You're blushing like,
um who
sorry.
are we to tell someone that it's safe, right?
Nothing.
We can contribute, but whether it feels safe or not is something very personal. And I think psychological safety of a group always falls down to the person who feels the least safe.
Hmm.
And then in a specific environment, maybe everyone feels, or the majority feels safe. And then there are environments where only the bravest and the personalities of those who don't give a damn, um, they feel safe.
Hmm.
Um, but then I think it's a personality type thing.
For me, there are three elements. The environment is a factor, but it doesn't affect everyone the same way that people are talking. Like that's great environment. Well, some people are not in the safest culture. They still know they don't care. They don't have ideas. Maybe they're mediocre, I don't know, but they're not going to
Yeah.
contribute. Then there's a personality that people in unsafe environment they still speak up and share
Yeah.
and challenge the status quo, whatever. And then there's a third, which is facilitation and tools.
Mm.
Because you can work in an unsafe environment and make people still take risk that usually they wouldn't, and the environment has not changed.
And that's I think what itches me is that can we speak of the safe environment? I think an environment is only safe or unsafe from the perspective of one individual person. I think there is no such thing as a safe environment. So
No,
the person who speaks will feel safe enough to speak, otherwise, they don't. So the environment is just the environment. It's not safe. For this person, it's safe.
but even if it's unsafe, what I'm
For
saying is
whom?
that some people can realize that the cost, the risk of not speaking or not contributing, it's most expensive than actually taking
So,
that risk.
so it's safe enough for them to speak up.
Maybe it's no, maybe it's not safe for them, but they
Mhm.
say, are
Mm.
you letting the environment? So it's unsafe. So I'm not going to speak up. Let's say what's happening here in the US.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of people getting fired, blah, blah. So it's unsafe.
Hmm.
People don't speak up. You can still get fired because
Yeah.
they are cutting everything. So at least you can say,
Mm.
well, if I speak up, at least I have chance to try to control my destiny. If not, maybe accelerate an outcome, but the outcome is already coming. So when you
Mm.
present this to people, for example, if you everyone in a team it's boycotting because they feel the team is going nowhere and say, well, you're gonna get what no, it's a wishful thinking, you're gonna sink the team.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's unsafe, your leader sucks, blah, blah, the company, we know,
And
okay,
you do it
but you're
anyway.
here, what are you gonna do?
Hmm.
Your behavior is gonna make the outcome worse. So people say, yeah, it's unsafe, but still, like, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
three pieces to the puzzle, but one.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. 100%. And then it's how did we get there? Sorry.
That was weird, I don't know, deviate. We were talking about being an observer or not, and my mind went into the when we stop having critical thinking, we start seeing exactly what we're supposed to see. So is a book, to your
Mm.
point, are you the hero or the book the hero? And sometimes we have books that are like unquestionable principles. Like that's why I brought. I'm not saying psychological safety is wrong, but it's just tackling one piece of a
Mm.
larger system. There are other elements. And because we bought into that, we stop seeing that what else.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
do you want your book to that's why I said, do you want people to land in the moon so they only see the craters of the moon and that's
Mm.
their world? or you want them to be a little bit off so they can see the moon, but also they can see there's a context and there are not only there are planets and the moon, which is a satellite, is there as well.
That's very interesting. Do you want people to have less questions or more questions after they finish the book? And yeah, I think by my nature, they will have more questions than answers after finishing the book. But maybe hopefully also some tools to find their own answers. Because at the end of the day, who are we to answer all the questions or to provide all the answers? But I think to raise a few questions where everyone can find their own answers, that's then the facilitation part that plays a role.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. It's what you're saying about the psychological safety and how sometimes, yeah, we get caught up in a subsection of the world and then try to explain everything around that or boil it down to just one problem, and don't see the complexity and interconnectedness of it. It's really helpful.
So, do you want your reader to feel frustrated after reading your book? Well, maybe it's a
No, I don't.
I can think about my book. How can I frustrate people? I mean, in fiction work, many times we readers, my wife reads a lot of novels and stuff. She's always reading like devouring books, right? And somebody say, "Oh fuck, this book, the end, I expected something, and then boom, it." So there's frustration because the the stories doesn't necessarily like end when we want as a reader. But then in business book, it feels that we need to come to a perfect end always.
Mm, yeah. It's like when music ends on a minor.
Mhm.
It feels it's not very satisfactory. It's like,
Tune down. Yeah.
yeah. And then, and I wonder, I'm thinking of, it was, I think, Charles Louis who hosted a workshop for the last NDB festival. Which was on endings.
Mhm.
And what happens to the group if we take away the endings from them? So if we don't close the loop. And I'm actually now I'm thinking of that because a a pop science book that doesn't land on that keeps the reader frustrated means that you're staying in an open loop. And I wonder whether it could actually be the fuel for action because frustration is energy.
Mhm.
And then if you feel frustrated, then you might want to do something, you might want to talk about it. Um, it's difficult to sit in frustration.
Like you said, as an excuse, you say, like,
Or that's yeah, an
oh, I'm
excuse to
frustrated, and then you quit, and
your frustration can also be a fuel instead
Mhm.
of an excuse. So, what are you doing with your frustration? How can you find a solution or an ending or closing the loop by yourself? Do you really need the book for it?
Yes, and let me think about Bob Sutton, a professor from Stanford. He says that if you're not facing resistance, you're not pushing enough.
Mm,
So usually we see resistance as something negative, but if there's no attacks or people that are frustrated or whatever,
Yeah.
then you are not changing much. And I think that if you feel frustrated, either it's because of your standards when it comes to, or expectation when it comes to writing a book, but also you're getting into a place that you know that yesterday you were happy and today you're realizing the potential, and that frustration is actually the transition from the liminal space, right? From
Mm.
where my book, I was comfortable with this book, and now I'm taking to new ground, and that connecting one point with the other, it's the liminal kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. And it's yeah, it's true. What is how can we yeah, so actually frustration means that something is moving. And I think to tickle the frustration of a reader, to get them out of their comfort zone, I think it actually must be the ambition of a book. To look to basically inspect our own lives or being or mindset, belief set from a new perspective. And then seeing, oh, it's basically pointing out a cognitive dissonance.
Mhm.
What's the image we have about ourselves? And how do we find excuses for our behavior that doesn't actually match the image?
The image.
Mhm.
And whose image is that?
Um, might be the objective image. So, for instance, someone who's someone who wants to be, who has a self-image of being professional, so knowledgeable, punctual, high quality, and then someone points out errors in the work, um, lower quality standards, and then cognitive dissonance would let them find excuses in the outside world to
Mhm.
explain why there's this dissonance and so that they can keep their image of being this perfect professional. So whose image? Then it's the outside world.
That's an interesting thing, because when you are doing your work as a professional, you're trying to please your own expectations or someone else's expectations.
Yeah. Yes.
So who defines what's professional? No, it's you that say, hey, that when the bar is too low, no, and they say that's not quite good enough as from a quality standpoint. Is that because you think your boss or your colleagues are not going to accept it, or is it because you have high standards?
And I think this is where that's actually where the juicy part starts. I sent out a survey to my newsletter list and um received replies. And what I found interesting is the tension between when I asked them, whom do you consider professional and what are their characteristics? All characteristics are positive. So when we think of someone who is professional, um, they are
Mhm.
delivering great work, they have show integrity, they are there for their people, they're role models. And when we think, and then when I asked them, how would you reframe professionalism? Then they show all the negative things related to professionalism.
Hmm.
So as if there is the dogma of professionalism that is all negative, and this is whose whose expectations. These are external expectations, but being professional, these are our own expectations. Maybe
Hmm.
that makes sense.
But what if you ask like a follow-up questions? What has your idea of professionalism limit your ability to do something
Yes.
from taking, and then how can unprofessionalism let you do things that you know what I mean? So more
Yeah.
about the because I tried to be correct, I didn't speak up, or I didn't challenge my manager's idea, whatever. You know, like in Japan, like people wouldn't ask their bosses a questions they think they don't know how to answer because they don't want
Yes.
to embarrass them.
Yeah,
That's being professional in Japan, right?
exactly. And I think that's very often the case because we are too preoccupied with the external judgment.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think those who we consider as professional, I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually breaking out of these external narrow definitions and dare to be different and hence earn the recognition while not fitting in the general frame. And that's I find very interesting because it's almost schizophrenic.
Hmm. I'm thinking about probably was going to write a post on LinkedIn, something short, but the other day I was writing an article and I tried to improve the opening. So I asked ChatGPT or Claude, whatever, or both, like, how would you, what would you improve it, right? And the article is about self-serving feedback. So when people give feedback, not to help the other person, but about them because they want to be they're ego-driven. And it was about a woman getting feedback from an ego-driven male that was clueless based on changes but are real. When ChatGPT and Claude replied back, they changed it about the woman hurt feelings because her ego was attacked by feedback and she couldn't take it, and her boss was challenging her.
Wow.
I didn't say rewrite it. I said help me improve the story to make sure it's clear, whatever. And they changed, so they turned the woman into the victim that her ego has been hurt instead of the guy being ego driven and arrogant and giving feedback about whatever and trying to impose his ideas.
That is scary.
And to my wife, I say, what?
Wow. That is very scary.
It is.
Yeah. And if we don't pay attention to that,
So basically, males never get it wrong because they are, and the poor woman who, no, she had her ego
yeah.
hurt because she couldn't take real feedback, like a professional. So that was it.
And if this
What
the lens through which our AI assistants are giving us advice, oh, we better watch out. Mm,
And that's another lens when it comes to who defines professionalism. Now you have a technology and an algorithm that's also fitting what it's
yeah.
professional.
Yes. Yeah. Um, and might repeat just the same um, wide Eurocentered way of seeing the world. Because I think, yeah, most of the corporate professionalism definition
Hmm.
come from, yeah, middle-aged white men
Yeah,
because they were the ones in the positions of power back then. So it made perfect sense back then, but it's no longer appropriate.
it makes sense, but many of them it's like noble titles. The same happens with leadership titles. They come because you were in the right place, so you got promoted. Many people were promoted because they were in the right place or
Yeah,
were part of a group
yeah,
of people and they were promoted by their peers, their friends, their lookalike.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, which is very human, and very unconscious even, very often. And nowadays, just because it's unconscious doesn't mean that it's okay because we know how our decision making is biased. So I have to take care of that. I think it's a part of responsibility.
It's scary.
Yeah. Yes, especially how it's dismantled at the moment. Uh, and this
But
gets
here
us.
we are. So
Yes,
making progress,
thank you. This was exactly the conversation I needed to have.
really.
Yes.
How so?
Um, I'm taking away a lot of ideas actually, and so I want to look into the frustration part. how can the book be a little bit more frustrating for the reader in the positive sense? I want to look at the hero's journey and daring to be the hero.
Mm.
Um, and then, yeah, the cognitive dissonance and whose expectations is it? And how limiting is that? So, yeah, three areas that I can look into that might reshape my book outline.
So looking forward to hearing from you.
Yes.
I'm seeing like I'm gonna turn tomorrow's experiment into maybe content, not just help me the like reshape the approach because I'm gonna learn stuff that I was missing. Or people say this sounds like bullshit. Okay, maybe I need to kill. And and I mentioned it's an university, so basically they're gonna be all professors. They're gonna be like attacking everything, the model, whatever. So I'm like naked in front of them, which is exciting, the challenge, but also I like the what insights from the experience I can bring to the introduction or storytelling to show how the book was conceived, because it's part of having these conversations that we avoid. And well, this is one, right? Like putting your thinking in front of people, like when you publish something. I was giving a workshop earlier and people, oh, you have a book. So the moment it's published, your credibility goes up because it's there. So people are, but if you say, hey, this hasn't been published, oh, like you're more vulnerable, if
Yes.
you know what I mean. So,
Which is actually also interesting because, especially when you self publish, it doesn't mean anything, right? If you published your unfinished book now, it would be published. It doesn't change the content.
mhm,
So it's just a perception. It's just
yeah.
another label.
And the challenge that we have is when you have an editor that, I mean, I always work with editors, but when it's an editor that basically is thinking about how I make money out of this book, because that's the role of the editor is not looking for the new theory on professionalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're looking like how would we get our return investment? How can you protect your original ideas
Yes.
so they don't get into it needs to land in a perfect place, in a very defined place, like, so it's marketable.
Yeah.
Unless that's what you want, which I'm not by any means judging, but you know what I mean? That we all want to sell the books too. But
Yeah. That's not the main motivation, at
the
least not.
tension is do something that's going to be sell a lot of copies or something that you're going to like. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Something you would read yourself. I like that question.
But well, here we are.
Thank you, Gustavo. I will send you all my positive energy and excitement for tomorrow and cannot wait to hear how it went.
I send you a text and I would say, I quit writing my book, or I'm excited. I won't quit, but it's going to be interesting. And the interesting, just to wrap up, I'm not going with the lens of this is going to work. I'm like just another day in life. You know what I mean? It's just what happens.
Yeah. And to have a bunch of professors look at your hypothesis and theory from their perspective, it's very interesting.
Mhm.
Can only be learning.
Let's make it fun.
Wonderful. Yes. And
See you in 2 weeks if we don't
um,
see before,
yes,
but
and let's have
otherwise,
our little screenshot.
of course, of course.
We
I'm
always
gonna
look so happy. Maybe we should.
cheers with water.
Great. Um, awesome.
Oh,
And I see you in 2 weeks. We don't have a time yet.
hold up, no.
Um, I am totally. I have no restrictions on that week, on the week of the 14th.
I'm gonna be on vacation, so I don't have any restriction, and I don't have any problem having the calls. You know what I mean? It's not an interruption. It's not work, and I would like to keep the cadence.
Yes. We can either do same day in 2 weeks, same day, same time.
Uh,
On the 15th?
Tuesday? Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Yeah,
perfect.
perfect.
Um, Send. Great.
Or if you can do it earlier, that would be even better. 1 hour earlier or whatever, but check your
Yeah,
availability.
1 hour
Okay.
earlier.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect.
Brilliant. See you then.
Great.
Take care. Bye bye.
And you too. Bye. Good luck for tomorrow.
Thank you.